My name is Brian Campkin, and this is my story. The Heart and Stroke Foundation says that every 5 minutes, somewhere in Canada, someone dies from heart and stroke disease. That means by the time I finish delivering my speech today, we will have lost another Canadian to this dreadful disease. In fact, 14 years ago, I was one clogged artery away from joining that club myself. But thanks to a life-saving triple bypass surgery, I was able to avoid this. Today, I want to share my story and my journey with heart disease with you. It's a story I call From Survivor to Thriver. It all started in January 2007. I was on my way to my weekly tennis match, and I was excited this week as I was playing my nemesis, Mark, who I'd never beaten. We started the match, and I got off to an early lead and was feeling pretty good about myself. But then partway through the match, as we were changing ends, I was having difficulty breathing. I actually got down on one knee and to try and catch my breath, and I looked at the roof of the tennis dome, and I thought to myself, I wonder what a heart attack feels like. But I quickly dismissed that because I was 47 at the time and in the best shape of my life, or so I thought. Tried to continue the match, but shortly thereafter, I had to forfeit and go home. When I got home, I told my wife about how disappointed I was about losing the match, and she quickly dismissed that and did what any good wife would do and honed in on my health. And she said, Brian, I think this deserves a trip to the family doctor. And like any good husband, I politely smiled and thanked her, but I declined. But she continued. And finally she said, Brian, if I at least make the appointment, will you go? I said, yes. Life-changing decision. You see, after 5 weeks of tests and an angiogram, I was diagnosed with 4 clogged arteries, 3 of them at 100, 99, and 86%. I was out on that tennis court barely firing on one cylinder. And I know I'm alive today for 2 reasons. 1, I listened to my body out on that tennis court. But 2, this is for all you guys out there, I listened to my wife. Now let me tell you, the hardest part of this whole journey was the waiting game. You see, that after I was diagnosed, I had to wait 6 weeks before I could have the surgery. Well, everybody else's lives went back to normalcy. My 3 kids went back to school. My daughter went to work. I was sent home from work because I was sick. And I was given a nitroglycerin spray to carry around in my pocket in case I had a heart attack. I didn't know what a heart attack felt like. My symptom, diagnosis, was shortness of breath on a tennis court. So I was feeling pretty anxious. And then one day my phone rang. And I picked it up and it was the family doctor. And I joked with him, I didn't think doctors made those calls anymore. And he chuckled, but then got a serious tone in his voice and said, but Brian, how are you? And I explained my anxiety and where I was at. And, this may sound simple, but he said, Brian, just keep it simple and don't overthink this. If you don't feel right or if you feel something odd, just call 911 or get to the hospital. You'll be fine. And those few words got me through the rest of the waiting game. From there, I landed on the big day of the surgery. Now I can tell you this in retrospect, it is no fun getting cracked open like a lobster and having a surgeon and his team put you on a bypass machine so he can take your heart and repair it. But the good news is you sleep through that part. Now this last piece here I'll share with you around the surgery. I have to say allegedly this story took place because I was in the ICU and still recovering from the anesthetic. Apparently my wife was waiting for me to come to, and the nurse came over close to dinner hour and said, Mrs. Campkin, why don't you get home and, take care of your 3 daughters and get them dinner. And while they're doing the dishes, give me a call. Here's my card. I'll let you know how Brian's doing. Lori thought that was a great idea. She went home and sure enough, afterwards, after dinner, she called the nurse and she picked up after 2 rings, but she sounded apprehensive. She didn't quite sound like the nurse that Lori had left at the hospital. And she wondered, is everything okay with Brian? And the nurse said, well, Mrs. Campkin, we think so, but we'll ask you. As he was coming out of the anesthetic, he kept trying to order a pina colada. Is that normal for him? Lori just smiled and shook her head and went, yeah, he's going to be okay. He was just at a swim-up bar. From there, I landed on Recovery Road. And that's when my heart was back in my chest and the ball was back in my court. And I wasn't going to lose this opportunity to have a great recovery. And when I got up the next day to the fifth floor, the recovery floor, I certainly told the nurse that was assigned to me, ma'am, I don't use call buttons. Okay, I'll come and go as I please. Thank you very much. And she said, well, we got us a spry one. She said, tell you what, Brian, you just had breakfast. I'm going to bring your lunch tray in a few hours. If in that time you can make a few trips to the patient's lounge and back to your room by yourself, we'll talk. So she came at noon and set down the tray. And how did it go, Brian? Well, I went down to the patient's lounge. There was another gentleman in there with the converter watching The Price is Right. I'm just not a fan. So I went to the other side of this floor and found the library and went through some books and so forth. She just smiled and said, yeah, Mr. Candy, you don't need to use that call button. You'll be more than fine. And that was really the first goal I set. As much as that might sound like a small goal, it was significant because it set me up for success going forward. A couple of days later, I left the hospital. They gave me a walking curriculum for when I got home. I had to do 28 walks in 28 days. And there was a series of different walks each day. But I remember that first day, going to the front door, sitting on the bench so that my wife could tie up my shoes because I couldn't bend over. I had 86 staples holding my chest, arm, and leg together where they'd harvest some arteries to do the replacement surgery. But I am proud to say that after 28 days, I was doing 2 kilometers in 30 minutes. When I started out, I just went one crack in the sidewalk further, each walk I went on, and eventually those cracks in the sidewalk led to the next street corner, next lamppost, the next block, and that's how I got to be able to do 2 kilometers in 30 days. I also made some lifestyle changes, as well as setting goals and milestones. As far as the setting lifestyle changes, first of all, I lost 20 pounds through the process. I started to practice moderation and portion control. I followed the Canada Food Guide that the Heart and Stroke Foundation had given me in armloads of information when I left the hospital. My breakfast no longer considered of takeout coffee and toothpaste. I made time for a proper meal every morning. But it's when I got to the cardiac rehab program shortly after getting home that everything changed. It was a 6-month program, and when I went that first day, my therapist said to me, Brian, do you have any big goals? Some aspirational ones? And I said, glad you asked. I have 3. I've come prepared because I want to hopefully hit all 3 of these goals. And I said, first, I'm the captain of a charity walking team, and we do a 60-kilometer walk every year. And I want to do that with my team this year. 2, I want to get back to competitive tennis. And 3, I've got 3 daughters that I want to walk down the aisle one day on their wedding day. She goes, great goals. How old are your daughters? I said 19, 16, and 13. She said, any weddings in the future? I said, geez, I hope not. She said, okay, well, that one's out there a little bit. Let's park that one for that deadline. Let's talk about competitive tennis. This is August. When does that start? I said, not till January. All right, let's put that one aside. You do a charity walk, 60 kilometers. When is that? I said, 6 weeks. She said, we got us a goal. And I followed religiously the curriculum they gave me, both at my classes and what I had to do when I was at home. And I'm very proud to say 4.5 months after my open heart surgery, I did that 60-kilometer walk through the streets of Toronto. 9 months after my surgery on New Year's Day, I ran a 5K. And 2 weeks later, I was back on a tennis court. But as I said, my biggest goal was walking those 3 girls down the aisle. I'm proud to say this. Daughter number 1, I walked down the aisle in November 2011. Daughter number 2, I walked down the aisle on July 14th, 2018. 2 out of 3, I almost had the hat trick. It was close. My 3rd daughter was booked to get married October 2019. But this thing, COVID, came along and kind of got in the way. So we had to postpone it. We were going to get her married on September 2020. COVID was still too big of an issue. We had to postpone it again. I'm happy to say that I will complete the daughter hat trick on June the 18th next year. Let me leave you with a couple of closing thoughts. First, from Margaret Mead, noted philanthropist, who said this: never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that has. And finally, I'd like to say thank you. Thank you to the Heart and Stroke Foundation. Thank you to HealthPartners. And thank you to you for your contributions in making and building a healthier Canada. Thank you, everyone.